Hello again, Tony Wright, FLCC, AB Wright Ministries. This is still that 90-day Bible study. Hey, look, what I want to do is provide a little background information in the book of Genesis. Now, I know initially I said I'd be putting out in this second iteration daily clips, providing background information or providing some context to the text. What I've found, two things, is one, the individuals, the locations, really the conditions, situation is not really changing rapidly enough for that. So what I'm going to do, though, is as events change, and there's enough significant enough change, whether it's for personnel or location or cultural change, whatever it is, I'll be providing these update background information clips as we go. That's first. Second thing was what I found was that I provided quite a bit of individual character, background information in the first iteration, and we dealt with a number of characters, and we talked about a lot of things concerning those characters, especially their characteristics. We talked about them being flawed. Most of them, if not all, had their own individual flaws. And that, the one individual I might single out of that from what we've covered here in Genesis anyway was maybe Noah. But we talked about individual flaws for many of those: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. As you go, you name it. But also, what I hope that I pointed out is the fact that through those flaws, God was able to show his awesome power. He was also able to show and demonstrate his grace and his mercy, and the way that he can choose and use whomever he desires. And he empowers those that he chooses to work, to do that kingdom work to his glory. And he empowers them to accomplish that in magnificent ways. And you can take an Abraham with all those flaws, and that Abraham can become truly the father of many nations. And those flaws have been there from the beginning. Go back to the beginning with Adam and Eve, and right away we started to see the flaws of humanity. But the saving grace in that is the fact that even with our flaws, even through our flaws, if we're willing to yield ourselves and submit ourselves to God, he can do a mighty work to us, and he can do a mighty work through us. So let's get right on into it. Starting, like I said, right there with Adam and Eve, right there in the Garden of Eden. Hopefully you can see the what I have on the screen here. And we're going to see if we can pull up here. If you can follow along, hopefully you can see this right near the lower right center of your screen, this orange circle. This circle represents the area where most theologians and scholars believe Eden was actually located. Now, why do they believe that? Well, if you read in the text, it says that there was a river that flowed through the garden, and that it separated into four other rivers. So, they believe that this was the river in the garden, and then the four rivers that separated out of it. And it actually names, you'll see the name of the Euphrates and the Tigris. You have the Ararat River and the Halys River. Now, on modern day maps and geographical documentation, you're probably not going to see any references to Halys River or Ararat River, but you'll certainly see the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. They're alive and kicking right today. This Mesopotamia area that it talked about is right there as well. And this area that we're looking at here is located in what is current day Iraq. As a matter of fact, here's the Persian Gulf. And just north of that, this little country of Kuwait is located. Just north of that is the country of Iraq. To the east of that is the country of Iran. Up here to the far north is what we know as of Turkey. Along this Mediterranean Sea coastline is, of course, Israel, Lebanon. In the northeast area of that is Syria. And then in the southeast area of that is Jordan. Over here, further east, southeast is Egypt. And right here in the center, this big area is Saudi Arabia. Now, we'll show this on another map that'll be a little clearer here in just a second. But the other thing I wanted to point out before we leave from this map is this circle here. Now, two things. One, some theologian scholars believe that Eden was located here, and a large reason, in a big part, they believe that because it talked about, the river flowing through the garden and separating into four, and the water from these rivers actually flows south here into the Persian Gulf. I don't believe that the authors of the text was too concerned about the way that the waters flow. They just described it the way that they saw it. And it makes more sense to me. So I believe I'm in the family of those that believe that it would be starting here, and the four rivers would be, these four rivers, regardless of the flow of water. The other thing I wanted to point out is when you talked about Noah and the ark landing on the Mount Ararat. Here's Mount Ararat here, which is in, current day Turkey, is up here in this area. See what it looks like, or closer anyway to what it looks like now. And again, if you orient yourself here and see the Euphrates River here, Tigris River here, and then you'll see a lot of names that you're more familiar with: Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. You see the Red Sea here when the children of Israel were leaving from Egypt, and they crossed the Red Sea here into the wilderness, which is this big desert area, Saudi Arabia. Kind of wandered around here for about 40 years or so till they got their act together. But this is a more modern map of what we were looking at just moments ago. Now, the text went on to talk about Abram, and Abram, his father, Terah, he had three sons: Nahor, Haran, Abram. And after they were, grown, and they were actually, all of them were married, and Haran died. Terah, the father, decided he was going to move his family. They were going to Canaan. Now, if you look here on this map, a couple of things are interesting here. Here's which was the birthplace of Abram, right? And then Canaan is over here in this area. It's an area, and Shechem was one of the cities, remember, in Canaan. But it's just pretty much due west of Now, why would Terah take his family and go way up here to Haran, and then on his way to here in Canaan? Well, you see this area here in the center? That's the Arabian Desert. He wasn't trying to take his family 600 to 800 miles across a desert to get there. So what they do, they followed pretty much along parallel to this river, the Euphrates, and he stopped here in Haran. And actually it says he lived there, right? Now, again, Haran had died prior to leaving here, but Haran was married. He had two daughters and a son, and they all traveled with Terah, their grandfather, to Haran. And they lived there until Terah, the father, died. And then God had told Abram to get thee away from his family and out of this area and go to an area that God would show him, which was going to be Canaan. And Abram was married, his wife Sarah, but they had no children. Nahor had children, of course, and then Haran's children were there. But Abram and Sarah took Haran's son, Lot, with them, Abram's nephew, and they went to Shechem, then later here to Egypt. But before we leave this map, another thing I'm going to show you, look where Ur is located. Yeah, it's in southern Iraq. Yeah, it's just north of the Persian Gulf. Yeah, but look at this area. Babylonia, Babylon. You know, years later, centuries later, when they would go into captivity, remember they were in captivity in Babylon. That was one of the areas that they were served in captivity when Judah went into captivity. And, you know, Babylon was known for this idol worship and, you know, polytheistic theology, which, you know, they worshiped all kind of gods. They worshiped rocks, you know, weather. It didn't matter. Trees, anything. Give them something. They worship it, right? And his family came from that culture. Now, surely, you know, they were partaking in the same worship traditions and practices, but God singled out that family, and out of that family chose Abram, and he was going to, you know, through Abram, establish a nation of people that would serve him and only him, one God. Why did he choose Abram? I don't know, but he chose Abram. And again, Abram had grown up in a culture that was known for idol worship and all kinds of ungodly practices. And God was going to use him to demonstrate not only his power, but his love and his commitment to those who would faithfully serve him, just him. Okay. So after, you know, Abram, Sarah, and Lot, they left there, went into Egypt, remember? And then Abram tried to pass Sarah off. No, he didn't try. He passed Sarah off as his sister to the Pharaoh. Pharaoh took Sarah in, and she was there with Pharaoh. And then after a while, it came out what the situation was. And, you know, Pharaoh said, why did you do this to me? You know, but he gave him, you know, all the cattle and stuff and sent him away. Made him a wealthy man, really, and sent him away. Him and Lot, you know, left and went their way. And remember, Lot, because they had so many cattle and so much livestock and stuff, they couldn't even, you know, stay in the same area that they were. This was a plain that they set up in with all this cattle and stuff, but they couldn't stay together. So Lot separated, and he went to Sodom over here, which, you know, this is the Dead Sea, and he's over here on the eastern side of that Dead Sea, southeastern corner of the Dead Sea. And Abraham and Sarah were up still in this area. Now, remember, God had made a promise to Abram and Sarah. He told Abram that he was going to make him the father of many nations. Abram's a little leery, you know, I'm going to be the father of many nations. I ain't even the father of one. So what did they do? Well, remember, before they, you know, left from Egypt totally, he tried to pull that same same thing with Abimelech. And God had spoken to Abimelech and told Abimelech, don't touch Sarah. If he did, he's pretty much a dead man walking, scared the bejesus out of him. So he gave him more cattle and stuff and just sent him on his way. Well, remember, Abimelech was the king of Gerar, which is here. And Sarah and Abram left from there. And then Sarah thought she was going to help Abram out, gave Abram her maid Hagar to be with, and Abram fathered a child through Hagar, Ishmael. and everything was fine for a little bit. But then God fulfilled his promise to Sarah. She had her son, Isaac. And after Isaac was born, all of a sudden Sarah wasn't cool with that anymore. And she said, Hagar was going to have to go. So, Abram, he's, kind of feeling the pressure. So he, packed her little sack, threw the little stick on his shoulder and sent him off into, he said, Hagar and Ishmael went into this desert area, a wilderness area of Beersheba, which is here. And then it further goes on that Ishmael grew strong in Paran, which is here. Now look where that is. That's in the heart of Saudi Arabia. So you already see that the lineage building from Abraham through Ishmael and these Arab nations that ties directly back through to Abraham, right? Already been set up, established. Now, before Abraham died, he was determined he was going to, find Isaac a wife. So he sent his servant to search for Isaac a wife. And the servant went to here in Nahor to find Isaac's wife, Rebekah. She was from Nahor, and brought her back with him to where Isaac and Abraham was. Now, some time later, of course, Isaac he and Rebekah have children, and they have Esau, and then they have Jacob. And then Jacob pulls his little pottage trick, and and Rebekah was afraid that Esau was going to wipe Jacob out. So she sent Jacob to live with her brother, Laban, here in Haran. And it says in the Padan Aram area, right? And that's where Jacob met his wives, Leah and Rachel, was here in Haran, Padan Aram area, but Haran, which is where Rebekah and her brother Laban were from. Just pull this up. Now this just shows some of the cities and regions and towns that where the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, eventually Joseph traveled through and to as they moved around the region. The other thing I'll point out though before we leave this particular map is this is where Sodom and Gomorrah was believed to be located, again in the southeastern corner of the Dead Sea. And why do I say believed to have been? Well, of course, Sodom and Gomorrah doesn't exist. God wiped them off the map. In fact, if Lot hadn't gotten his little hind end out of there, it would have wiped him out too. We wouldn't have read anything about Lot except he got his hind end wiped out. But this is where it's believed to have been located, is in this area. Now, hopefully this background information provides you just a little bit of context as to how things were oriented, what was moving around. Keep in mind the 400 years between the time that Noah and the ark came to rest there, and he and his sons and daughters began to repopulate, and where we heard about Abram and moving or leaving out of Ur, on their way eventually to Canaan. 400 years is a span of time. Now we're going to see another span of time similar to that right here in Genesis, where when we get to where Joseph has gone back into Egypt, sold into slavery, set up, and then brought his family there. And really, we're just looking at that because that's the flow of the promise. So always keep that in mind, the flow of the promise. So the promise, went from over here in Babylon, went up, it's into Canaan, then it goes into Egypt, and then it comes out of Egypt back to Canaan. But there's going to be another 400-year gap between when Joseph is there and setting up and, gaining stature in Egypt, and the time that Moses comes along, that God has said it's time for his people to go. So we'll see that gap as well. Hopefully this background information provides you a little bit more context. Again, we'll be coming back to kind of tie Joseph in as we move into this Exodus phase. Look, I love you. You know what to do. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, FLCC, we're doing background, baby, and we're on the move. Hope to see you again soon. Peace.